This is Scott Becker with a special episode, a combined episode of the Becker's Healthcare and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. We're thrilled today to visit with one of the great CEOs in healthcare. We're visiting with Randy Oostra. Randy served as the long-term CEO of ProMedica in Ohio and did an absolutely amazing job as a leader and as a person, a combination of both. Just a fantastic job in leading that system through a tumultuous and fantastic couple of decades. Just a brilliant leader. Randy left the CEO position after being there what seems like for a very long time, and has now started and is working on investing in healthcare across a variety of areas. And we're going to ask Randy to take us through what he's doing today and talk about what he's doing and more. Randy, let me ask you to introduce yourself and tell us about what you're doing today.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So 40 years in healthcare, 25 years at ProMedica, 15 years or so as the CEO. And in my late 60s, decided to do something else. My dad worked till he was 85, and he always said that retirement's not a biblical concept. So I got a ways to go yet in life. And then did two things. One is took a little time off, of course, what they tell you to do when you retire. And then joined the CEO Advisory Network, a great group of professional leaders who are helping consult to folks that need help. And then through a number of years and interests, started a venture capital longevity fund called BlueprintN1. And the thesis behind that is statistically, we are all an N of one, and you need a blueprint for your life. So got very, very interested in aging a number of years ago. That led to just getting fascinated about longevity, which today is at probably a high point. And it goes back to reading about the hallmarks of aging that we can talk about that, was over a decade ago identified, a visit to a fantastic research place called the Buck Institute in Marin County, California. Had a full longevity physical, Scott, that kind of did all the type of things that we're talking about today. And then just been focused on building this venture capital company, investing only in companies in the longevity space. So that's kind of, a quick synopsis of probably about 14 months of work, and just real excited about this next phase of my life and career.
Oh, well, fantastic. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to start with, and then we'll talk a little bit about people like Peter Tia, Michael Roizen, and so forth. They've done a lot of writing and thinking about aging and trying to keep your health as well as your life. But let's start with something just a little bit personal, Randy. You've done a great job of keeping yourself physically and mentally healthy for as long as I've known you. So talk a little bit about what are besides being obsessed with the topic, which is part and parcel of this, what are some of the thoughts that you have about maintaining physical and mental health and aging well?
Yeah, I think for my family and I, a lot of things have changed. My wife and I grew up in Iowa and probably had meat every meal. And today we're not vegetarians, but pretty close. We eat a lot of fish, chicken, and then we eat a ton of vegetables. Have always exercised, partly just because that's kind of what I've enjoyed, and always was a great stress reliever. And then since retiring, I focused a lot more on getting better sleep. And I never smoked. I had a father that had lip cancer from smoking, so I always promised my mom I would never smoke. And so really, just kind of kept myself physically fit as best I could. Some years are better than others. And my wife and I are huge walkers. Our goal is to walk 16,500 steps a day. That takes several hours. And so, have really felt that's part of our life. And then, of course, our faith is important to us as well. And I think just as we think about the things that we see in longevity today, exercise, diet, sleep, don't smoke, limit your alcohol, sun exposure, and having that socialization in life. Those are all the things that, you kind of work on as a person every day. And that's really been our goal in life for my family and I.
And before I ask you about goals of the fund, talk about some of the influences who are influences to you on these subjects. Who do you study on these subjects of aging well and so forth? I know a couple of people that I've followed and read and listened to, but who are some that you listened to or think about a lot that have had influence on how you think about longevity and aging?
Yeah, I had the benefit initially of a number of years ago visiting the Buck Institute, which is probably the premier aging research center in the United States. Fascinating story. We don't have time today about how they got created. Eric Verdon, Dr. Verdon is the CEO. Think highly of him. If you don't follow this, if you're interested in the topic, follow the Buck Institute on social media. Peter T, of course, he wrote that great book, Outlive, which is a bit of a slog to get through. But I think some of his observations about medicine, of course, David Sinclair is very, very well known in the space. And then Michael Roizen from the Cleveland Clinic is one of our advisors. So Michael's a friend and have really followed a lot of his things as well. And then there's just a whole variety of different sort of organizations that regularly post about social media. So if someone's interested, I just start getting out there, follow the Buck, and I think you'll go from there and you'll build this whole network of people you can follow. I think what's happened over the last few years is that network has really vastly expanded. I was just at the Buck Institute for a longevity conference. And the number of speakers talking about their work and the things they're doing, there's just a ton of folks to follow, and just encourage people to just, start small and build their network.
Fascinating. Take one moment on Michael Roizen, Dr. Roizen, and sort of the brilliance of his concepts of real age and aging and so forth. Give us one moment on Dr. Roizen. We've had him on the podcast a couple times. I find him absolutely brilliant and follows work for a long time. Give us 30 seconds on Dr. Roizen.
Yeah, incredibly smart guy, probably was looking at longevity before most folks were. I think what's interesting, I think we're starting to see physicians now look over their shoulder. People watch the Blue Zones on Netflix. They're starting to get questions. Roizen was a pioneer in the space. He's done a tremendous work. He's got a new app out that's really great if you're interested in tracking your own longevity journey, and then has written very, very well about kind of how do you sort through all the things that are out there. There's a lot of noise in the space, as you know, Scott, and somebody like that's just kind of a voice of reason, a physician who is very credible and really looks at research. So yeah, I think if you're really looking for someone to take a really hard look at, someone that's got a great clinical reputation and base, he would be the guy to look at.
Fascinating. Talk about investing in the space. What does that start to look like? What kind of companies? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, we started our idea of this BlueprintN1, which I talked about, was kind of the formation. So a couple of partners and I started talking about it, and then it's really kind of been my focus since I've retired. So it started with kind of a friend of a friend, Greg Norman, who's very, very focused on his longevity. His son-in-law, Scott Dillavue, some folks from Chicago, First Trust, and some folks here from Ohio. And really what we wanted to do is start a fund that is purely longevity focused. So we're looking at any sort of company that may have a wearable that is longevity based. And one of our first investments was in a company called Apollo Neuro, great company based in Pennsylvania out of UPMC. It's a neurostimulus watch. I can't sleep without the thing. It helps you to calm down and a variety of things like that. We've invested in epigenetics, the whole field of epigenetics. We're looking at companies that, produce NAD. We've talked to a variety of companies that are either in the wearable market or have some sort of nutraceutical base to them. And really what we're looking for is companies that, have some revenue, they're established, they're clinically based, and ones that we feel strongly about that we can help. And I think that's probably the mantra you hear a lot from venture capital folks. Between the networks of our founders and then our advisors, we really want to help companies grow and, gain some traction. And so, yeah, we've got about probably a dozen pipeline companies that we're looking at, all I would say in those kind of major buckets. And those are the things that we're looking at investing right now.
Thank you. In terms of great fit senior level golfers, who is better at this, Greg Norman or Gary Player?
That's a really good question. I don't know Gary. I'm going to go with Greg Norman. I met him before the Live Golf venture started, and very, very focused on his health and well-being. Intends to live, well above 100. Takes care of himself. All the type of things, all the boxes that you would check from longevity. That's what he is really approaching for his own life. And then just my experience with him is you couldn't meet a nicer, down-to-earth guy. From the first time I met him, blue jeans, cowboy boots, showed up with a yellow notepad, took notes, and then asked a few questions. And yeah, just a great guy. So I would put it very, very high on the list. I'm sure everything you read about Gary Player, he's right there as well. And I think that's the thing for all of us. So much out there today, Scott, in the whole longevity world. And when you start looking at the list of biomarkers and all the supplements and things that are out there, and then at the hallmarks of aging, it's really, I think, a time for healthcare to start looking over their shoulder at the whole longevity world. I mean, today, I think McKinsey's daily read said it was a $1.3 trillion business. I've read higher numbers. And people are very, very focused on longevity. So I think the idea for healthcare is to begin to start to look at this, because this is really what consumers want. But again, it's just out of the mainstream of healthcare. And I think, as we know, healthcare is a bit slow on the uptake on a lot of these things.
Randy, again, fantastic executive and leader and thinker. Randy Oostra, long-term CEO of ProMedica, brilliant, good person. Randy, where can people learn more about BlueprintN1 and about what you're doing?
Yeah, for one thing, just send me a note at randy@BlueprintN1.com, and I'm happy to send you a variety of things. And we also have a website, so you can go to BlueprintN1 and look us up there. And love to share more information. A lot of dialogue. Of course, we use LinkedIn a lot as well. So yeah, give us a shout. We'll share some things. I think if you're not familiar with the hallmarks of aging that came out in 2013, when the hallmarks of cancer came out, that really changed radically our approach to cancer. And the hallmarks of aging are doing that as well, as we think about kind of a clinical approach to aging. So I would strongly suggest people take a hard look at that. And then find a physician that really thinks that longevity is something to look at. And then each one of us is different, so you got to kind of create your own personal journey.
Randy, what a pleasure to get a chance to visit with you. Randy Oostra, gifted executive, leader of the ProMedica system for a very long time, just did an incredible job. He's a role model to me in terms of a person who sort of takes care of themselves, takes care of business, is great to people, and extremely smart, just a great, great leader. Now he's on his next effort, which is to build this private equity fund to invest in aging and longevity. Fascinating to hear what you're doing. Randy, thank you for joining us again on the Becker's Healthcare and Becker Private Equity Podcast. Always good to visit with you.
Yep. Thanks, Scott.